Hey guys, how's it going? This is Mike from Too Much Sugar, and this is going to be the first of many episodes of my 3D Studio Max tutorial. By the end of these tutorials, you should be able to easily navigate 3D Studio Max and use all of its basic components in order to properly use the application. So in this first episode, we're going to be looking at the interface and how to navigate the interface in order to be able to find everything we need to find while we're using the program. So I will start by showing you the three main zones that you're going to pay attention to about 95% of the time in 3ds Max. The first is right here, which is these nice four panes right over here, which are called the viewport, or rather the viewports. We've got the toolbar up here, and we've got what's called the command panel over here on the right, which is where you're going to spend a majority of your time when you need to create or modify anything. Now, I'll explain each of these elements one by one and in a decent amount of detail. So let's start with the viewport. Now, first things first, here we've got four different, we can see that it's separated into four different panes, okay? Now, each pane has two important little pieces of information right here. Okay, we can see that in this one it says perspective and then smooth plus highlights. Now, the first one of these is going to, if you click on it, give you different perspectives that you can have for this camera. So there are actually different camera types. So we've got perspective, orthographic, then top, bottom, front, back, left, right, and then the rest of the stuff that we don't need to look at right away. If we look at the other one right next to it, this is how our current viewport is going to be rendered. So let's take a look. Currently we're at smooth plus highlights, and we can have a whole bunch of options. The one I like to use the most is edged faces, and I'll explain why later. So I'll just tick edged faces off right here, and I'll continue showing you guys what the important things are. Now, one of the most important things in 3D Studio Max is knowing your hotkeys. And one of the most important hotkeys, and the ones you'll probably use the most, is Alt-W. Now, what Alt-W does is this. As you can see, we currently have this viewport selected by the little highlighting that we've got around our viewport. If I click on another one, I am going to be in this viewport. If I click on another one, that viewport. Now, if, for example, I don't need these three viewports, then I can just resize these viewports and have them become different sizes, and then have this one kind of take the most space, but still be able to use these as references. But if I want to take this one and make it full screen and remove these other ones completely, I use Alt-W. And what Alt-W does is that it completely removes all of the other viewports that are in the that are normally in the viewport section, and I am left with this baby right here maximized. If I want to undo that, all I have to do, press Alt-W, and it'll reset me exactly where I was earlier with my viewports. So I'll just put these back how they were here. And now I'll show you how to navigate inside of a viewport. Now, I'll just open this one back up to full size here. So we'll just click this, there we go. Now, this is the basics of navigation, okay? We've got our middle click. So if we hold down the middle click, this will allow us to move our camera around the scene, okay, on a flat plane. So we're currently on a flat plane moving along the inside of the scene. Okay, you can see that this is activated by the little hand that your cursor becomes. Now, if I want to, for example, rotate around my object, I can hold down Alt and once again use the middle click button and hold it down, and I will be able to rotate inside of my viewport. Now, to zoom in and out, I will use the scrolling key, right, up and down, scroll in, scroll out, and it works perfectly. And finally, let's say my object is completely off of the screen, and I don't know where it is. I can simply press the Z button, and it will center everything that I currently have in my scene onto the screen. So as you can see, it's very close. Okay. So for example, let's say I have another object out here. Okay, and I'm out here, but I want to make sure that I have everything in my scene centered. I can just press Z, and everything in my scene currently will be centered onto the screen. If I want to center onto one specific object, I can select that object as I've done now, and then press Z, and Z will zoom into that concentrated object. Now that we've got that set up, the last element worth showing inside of the viewports is our little cube right up here. And this is the navigation cube. Some people prefer using the navigation cube to using the Alt and the middle click. Some people don't have a middle click button on their mouse and therefore will need to use our lovely cube here. What our cube does is we can actually click and drag any part of our cube and we'll be able to rotate it in the environment as I'm doing right now. Now let's say I'm out in the middle of nowhere and I'm out here and my box is out in the distance and all I really want is to have my box back, but I don't know where it is. Oh, I keep seeing little flashes of it. Well, have no fear. There's a little house button right up here, and if you click it, what it does is it recenters everything to exactly how it was when you opened 3D Studio Max. So you'll be able to find the center of your screen and it'll concentrate on point 0 of your grid. Now our little cube companion over here actually has a couple of other uses. For example, let's say I'm in a perspective view, but I don't want to have to Alt-W out and go look into another one of my viewports. I can just stay in this one and then see if I want to see what the top of my scene looks like. I can simply click the top of the cube, highlighted right here, and it actually gives me my top view. So these are the basics of viewport navigation. Now I'll show you guys how to manipulate items that are currently in the scene. Now the action buttons for these are actually found inside the toolbar, which is right up here. Okay, we've got our select and move. Okay, we've got our select and rotate, and we've got our select and uniform scale. Now these are the three selection tools that we'll be using the most often, and I'll show you what the hotkeys for these are because we'll be switching back and forth for them quite often. So first things first, let's select our object in our scene, and we will, in order to move it around, if we want to move it in our scene and we want to use the select and move option, we press W. Now, as you can see here, we've got our little widget. If we want to rotate it, we press E, and if we want to scale it, we press R. Now, I'll quickly explain how the little widgets work. Let's go back to select and move. Now, if I want to move my cube, highlighting the axis upon which I want to move my object, I can simply grab and drag, and it'll drag on that axis, ignoring all the other ones, okay? Same with the X, same with the Z, okay? Now, if I want to move something along, for example, 2 axes, like for example, let's say I have an object on a tabletop and I want to move it around on top of the tabletop. Well, I want to move it along the X and Y axes, right? But freely. So what I'm going to do is come and highlight this little square over here and just drag it around. I don't need to hold anything special, just hold the left click down and drag it around however I like. Now, if we look at the rotation tool, which is E again, right? I can rotate once again on the axis however I like and move my cube however I want to. Now, when it comes to rotation, rotation can be rather tricky because if I want to rotate something exactly 90 degrees, it can be a little tricky. Let's see if I can get it here. 89 point. See, I'm not quite able to nail it, but that's not a problem because what I'm going to do here is this. Okay, up here in the toolbar, we have a little button that's called Angle Snap Toggle. Now, if we click on this, what it does is actually when we have an object selected and we are in rotation mode, our object is going to rotate around its pivot point and click and snap, not really click, but snap every 5 degrees. So you can see here we're 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on until 90 degrees. Bang, just like that. and now I've rotated my object 90 degrees. Obviously this is a cube, so it doesn't really show all that much, but you get the idea. Now the last of the three tools we're going to look at is the scale. And the reason I'm not a fan of the scale is for the following reason. Now if we look at our item over here, the parameters of our item as a cube, right, has length, width, and height. So as we can see, the length, width, and height of our cube are all 50, okay? And logically, if I were to scale my object up, the size would increase because the size of my object is increasing, right? Wrong. As you can see, the parameters in length, width, and height of my cube are still 50, but the cube is significantly larger than it was when I first made it. Now the reason you should try and avoid using scale for anything other than rendering in a 3D Studio Max scene is because if for any reason you're going to be exporting an object, the object will export in the original size of what it was, even though you've worked on it on a larger scale inside the engine. It can also ruin UVs or other such things that you may have applied onto your item. So we try and avoid using scale as much as possible. Now, last but not least, we've got the awesomeness that is the command panel over here. And I will show you what the basic tabs of the command panel are. Okay, I'm not going to go into too much detail. We'll go over that a little bit more in the next video. Now, to start, we've got the Create tab, the Modify tab, the Hierarchy tab, the Motion tab, used mostly for animation, the Display tab, and the Utilities tab. So if for any reason you want to put an object into your scene, you will be using the Create tab. This is how I created my little box, and I'll show you guys more on this in video number 2. Okay. Once you have an object in your scene and you want to modify it, you'll be using the Modify tab right over here to do any number of modifications that you'll be able to put onto your object. We'll be going over that in video number 3. The Hierarchy tab will be used to majoritarily to affect the pivot points of our objects, and once again I'll explain that more in video 2. And then we've got these other 3 tabs which we will not look at very much over this video series, as we'd be looking at a significantly more advanced 3D Studio Max, and this is an introductory tutorial. So I hope you've learned something here today. I hope you're looking forward to the next video. It's where we get into the really interesting stuff. We're going to start modeling and bringing things into the scene, and we're going to start looking at primitives, how to use them, what the parameters mean, etc., and then starting to create a little scene. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the joys of learning tutorials that we've got set up for you. We've got a whole lot more coming your way, not just 3D Studio Max tutorials, but we'll have a bunch of other ones as well. And if you have any questions, comments, gripes, issues, feel free to leave them in the comments section down below. And stay tuned for video 2. Thanks, have a good one.